Hello, hopefully everyone can hear me. So, welcome to our very first EB Meetup Live event. For those who don't know me, I'm Roger Kalis. I'm the creative director here at Leap Create. And if you don't know us, we're a creative communications agency that specializes in employer branding and recruitment marketing. We often find ourselves partnering with in-house brand specialists, employer brand specialists, to tell employee stories, shape culture, and attract and retain talent. And I know some of you here have been to our in-person EB meetups before. And this EB meetup online, we're trying to bring the same knowledge sharing ethos to the virtual space. Just to reassure you, these are in addition to the in-person events. And there's a chance to plug the next one now, which is actually on the 25th of March. And the theme is untapped recruitment marketing channels. So keep an eye out for that, and there'll be more details soon. But back to today's webinar, which is titled From Alphas to Boomers. And this is going to be all about exploring the intergenerational workplace. And we're thrilled to have three expert guests with us today in the form of Erica, David, and Pierre. And they'll introduce themselves shortly. But just before that, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, which is to say that because we got those three panelists and we got lots of ground to cover. There won't be a live Q&A today, but we will be sending out a survey immediately afterwards. And if you've got any questions, then you can put them on there and we'll make sure that we follow up with you. We've also got a little poll, which I'm going to try and launch now, which is about the multi-generational challenges. So I will launch that now. If you can answer that, and then at the end we can share the results. So first of all, let's get started. So Erica, if we start with you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you, Roger. Hi, everyone. My name's Erica Rose, and after 30 years of working in an operational role for the Body Shop, gaining a number of years' experience as a senior leader, I had my passion for all things to do with equity, diversity, and inclusion and belonging ignited when I was one of the co-founders of our first employee networks, which was our LGBTQ plus network. That led me eventually into the world of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging on a more permanent basis. So I'm now the managing director of Unleashed International, and we're an organisation that supports our clients with leadership development, with culture audits, and all aspects of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging training and consulting. It's great to be here. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. And then Pierre, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Chief Brand Officer of a creative agency called 10 Days, and I'm a Gen Alpha specialist. So part of my role is to look after our trend reports and trend research, sort of what do brands and companies need to focus on next. And that's very much based on generational research. So a couple of years ago, around COVID time, everyone was obsessed with Gen Z. How do they tick? What do they want? And now that's shifting. So for the last couple of years, I've been focusing on the next generation, Gen Alpha, that are growing up now. The oldest are 15 years old. So yeah, I write and speak about Gen Alpha regularly, and that's the aspect I'll cover on this webinar today. Thanks for having me, Roger.
And Pierre, just to say, obviously I caught your session last week at the Internal Communications Engagement Award, and it was really, really interesting and fascinating. So I know you've got some great insights that hopefully you'll share with us today. And last but very not least, David.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Roger. My name's David Phillips. I work for a company called CGI. For those that don't know us, we're an IT consultancy, global IT consultancy. Started in Canada, but we've got a big presence in the UK. My role there is to look after talent, brand, and recruitment marketing, which obviously is heavily influenced by our approaches to attracting a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. So yeah, we've worked on various campaigns over the years, partnered very closely with the networks in the business to ensure that we're doing the right thing. And I'm really pleased to be here today and hopefully can share some of that work with you.
Fantastic. Well, that's the introductions done with. So I will just set the scene by saying that if a multi-generational workplace is an environment where employees from different age groups all work together, obviously, but this can span from baby boomers, Gen X, which I think I am, millennials, Gen Z or Z, if you prefer, and also then looking ahead to Generation Alpha, which is they're coming next. So as we know, each generation is going to bring its own unique perspective, skills and values, and those are going to be shaped by the experience that they have in life. But as an employer and as an organization, this can require some thoughtful management sometimes, especially when you're trying to bridge the potential gaps in communication, work styles and expectations. So I thought we'd start by talking about some of the challenges and opportunities. And my first question is, if you could share some examples of how different generations contribute unique strengths to today's workplace. And I don't know who wants to begin.
I start with that. So Generation Alpha are obviously born from 2010 to this is the last year, 2025. So they haven't reached the workplace just yet, but we can already predict what they're gonna bring to the workplace, and they're gonna be very tech savvy. So it's not unusual for a Gen Alpha kid to walk up to any screen and touch it and swipe it, because that's how they've grown up with these tech devices. But I read a study recently that says that an 8-year-old today surpasses their parents in their tech skills, and I can confirm that with my children at home. They're surpassing my tech skills already. When we set up something new, we set up new Alexas in the house and over Christmas, and my husband and I were struggling. My kids basically just did it by themselves and figured out functionality that I didn't know existed. So this is something that's supported by research. 8-year-olds surpass parents in their tech skills today. Technology is developing faster. This younger generation is going to pick that up faster. So I think that's something that it's going to be natural to them, basically.
I think it's quite nice to lead on from that. So once Generation Alpha join the workforce, I think it's true that we'll have potentially five different generations within the workplace, which and there's differences, which is why we have the names, which is why we have them categorized. There's differences, and there's different lived experiences, and there's different needs. And I think one of the challenges we're going to face as we move forward is that a workplace has to be adaptable to those diverse needs. And I'm going to always look at it through an EDI lens. The more diverse, the more inclusive an organization is, of course, then it's more set up to support those people with their different needs. But there's lots of opportunities to come if there can be a positive culture of intergenerational collaboration, and there's the right skills within an organization to adapt to the different needs, then there's no reason why an organization can't take that as a massive strength, take the opportunities that come with potentially having 5 generations in your workplace, to take the strengths from those different generations, but also be mindful and flexible of the different needs, because there's going to be different needs, different opportunities. Obviously, the workforce can provide different lived experience, bring diverse perspectives. But if you're an organization, say, that has a customer base that could be across those 5 generations, then to have that skill and lived experience within your organization is going to help you adapt and be more successful for your potential customers.
Yeah, I think adaptability is absolutely key, and flexibility in the workplace, and in sort of approaching these changes. I was looking at my own career journey, which has been about 17 years, and sort of the workplace back in 2008 when I entered it to what it's like now is completely different, and along that way lots of things have changed, and a lot of people have played a role in sort of managing that change and making it seamless change. So rather, yes, we've got Gen Z Z coming in who are disruptors, and they are tech savvy, but you know, that change happens over the course of time, and you've got to look to, you know, say people from, you know, Roger, I think you said you're from Gen X. I'm not, you know, I'm millennial, but you know, your generation was probably the one that didn't, you know, when you entered the workplace, tech wasn't as you know, as prominent then, and there's skill there in managing that change and how you've sort of bridged the generations that have come in that time to make sure that it is seamless, and I think that's, yeah, that you can't undervalue that sort of role that's to play.
It's interesting
along the journey as well.
I think that was probably the sole reason I got a job, was because I joined a design agency and they just got Macs, and I think I was the only person that knew how to use it. So I think that sort of definitely helped me on my career journey. I think we often do look to youth, don't we? And particularly I think in this country, if we think about how we treat our old people, sometimes I think we do look at youth as being, it's all about the next big thing, what's coming next. So I don't know if any of you've got any examples of practical steps that organizations can take to actually tackle ageism and hopefully eliminate it. Maybe a slightly self-interested question, but
I think it's important to acknowledge bias and start with awareness, as with all D&I sort of groups. Educate employees on age-related stereotypes, what's right, what's not wrong, unconscious bias training, and that's just not in the workplace. It's also really key to you know, inclusive recruitment practices as well. Something that we've looked at over the years is age neutral, gender neutral language in job postings, you know, not over putting limits on certain things. You know, I think at least, I don't know, there's some real basic ones, like, you know, you must have a driving license. I know you can drive when you're 17, so it's probably not relevant, but some people don't know how to drive. But, you know, focus on skills over age, and sort of being overtly biased to, you know, who you're trying to recruit. You know, we're using the words like dynamic. That's the one that always used to come up in recruitment. You know, avoid it because it can be loaded. So being mindful of that. But I also think, you know, there's, you celebrate multi-generational teams, share the successes of how people have collaborated and come together. You know, diversity is at the heart of our values, and you know, we don't shy away from showcasing that. But yeah, they're just some things.
Eric, I'd be interested to know if you find yourself consulting on any of these themes.
I think they naturally come into play because it's part of being, you know, creating an inclusive environment. So I think it's definitely being spoken about more. It never used to be to the extent that it is now, because I think there is that awareness that it's another really strong argument for inclusion and for the work that you know we those of us who try to do around inclusion. You know, I think one of the aspects that came to mind for me when David was speaking was around the importance of having, you know, good leaders, good quality, inclusive leaders, because if you're going to, it's all, you know, very well having a group of diverse people from different generations in your team, but then if you haven't got a leader who's going to encompass that different lived experience and encourage that collaboration and know how to adapt their leadership styles, that's, you know, very key. Because one person, me being, you know, I'm Generation X as well, compared to, say, a Generation Alpha coming into the workforce in, you know, in the coming years, there's going to be potentially very different needs in how we want to be led, how we want to be managed, how we want to be supported, the ways we want to be communicated to. And I think one size definitely doesn't fit all. And that's got to be one of the skills that I think is developed further within leaders. And that will be the difference between an empathetic, inclusive leader and a leader who doesn't, you know, perform as well, is harnessing that power from all of their team, but doing it successfully and knowing how to do it. And, you know, whether they're role modeling, whether they have training, whether they have mentors. And then, yeah, of course, reverse mentoring can come into play too, and be a massive advantage for understanding each other. But also, just one last thing I'll add, one is not pigeonholing people into particular generations, because just because, Roger, you and I are Generation X, we'll have different needs too, and we're going to have different lived experiences. So it's got to be even more adaptable, even across and within the generations as well.
So can any of you talk to how communication styles have evolved, or how we can cater to different generations within the workforce?
Well, I'll quite happy jump back in just briefly, because when I first started out back in the working in the 1990s, there was lots of handwriting. There was lots of using carbon copy paper, photocopiers, fax machines. And you're right, Roger, or David, I'm sorry, which one of you said about having that adaptability to then transition to know and understand tech as it came in, and suddenly spending your whole day in front of a screen. But yeah, we've got instant messaging, emails. We've got some people who like the bullet, short, sharp, messaging. Others would like to have a face-to-face meeting and have a piece of communication, delivered to them in person. Yeah, that just a few. I'm sure there's more.
I think digital tools are so important in tracking the sort of change of the workplace over the years, and sort of the pace at which it sort of, I think, making the pace at which it has changed so clear. I think back to 2019, 2020. Hate to go to the dark days of the pandemic, but prior to that, we weren't using Teams and didn't have video conferencing. Just 5 years later, I can't think of a world where we don't have video conferencing or speaking, face to face like we are now on here. And beyond that, we've now got things like Slack and all sorts of which even sort of moves the dial even further forward. It's constantly changing, but I think it is a real reflection of sort of those what I guess the point that you entered the workforce and sort of your reference point, like handwriting can be and MacBooks can.
I just want to,
well, you go ahead, but I had a question for you, but you might be about to answer.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say I did a little qualitative interview study with 11-year-olds a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them, so if you could design a new technology for work to improve work, what would it be? It was very interesting. They were talking about a hand and a pen that would take away the laborious, more boring administrative tasks from their day-to-day job, so they can socialize more, so they can talk more in person. I thought that was such a brilliant answer from, it was an 11-year-old girl that gave that answer, but it really showed what they expect from the future and what AI is already doing. It will take away and replace some of the laborious tasks and make them more, make them faster. And they want to spend more time in person, so they're aware of that as well. And I think there's also, I mean, as we said, how different generations can work together. I think it's all about collaboration and learning from each other and being aware that we have different strengths and different weaknesses. So being open to that, and then obviously there's some needs that are absolutely timeless, which is sort of the belonging, the community, this person-to-person contact, which is really valued by Gen Alpha as well. They're aware that they have all this technology at their hands, but they also need to have the interpersonal skills, obviously.
But they want. I was going to say, it sounds like they're describing a cross between the Addams Family hand and the magic quill in Harry Potter. Yeah. But, sorry, David, it was a.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, Pia touched on the buzzwords that everyone's, AI at the moment, and it just struck me how that we recently introduced it to the company. We're using it for certain things, like every company is at the moment, but it seems to be universally embraced, and everyone has seen the value in it. And that's actually something that has crossed all, that sort of transcends the generations or these labels. And I've seen people from all corners of the business, all backgrounds, all age groups, and AI is great. It actually makes life a lot easier and sort of we are finding uses for it. But there's not that fear that sometimes come with tech. You know, we go back to a lot of millennials, I don't think like to pick up the phone, and I've said that bandied about throughout my career because I'm a part of that generation where, okay, we were the first tech generation. You know, and sort of for me that is my default. I prefer to hide behind the screen, as they call it, as opposed to, it's just because I don't love the phone. But yeah, I'm just, when I'm looking at this you know, AI and the introduction, it's really struck me how quickly it's been sort of picked up, and by the real sort of cross section of, you know, colleagues, different age groups that are really embracing it and using it. So it's quite promising. It's a new frontier.
That's a really good point. I'd never really thought about that, because I guess there are some platforms and communication tools, and particularly social platforms, that tend to be the preserve of a particular age demographic. And I know that Facebook certainly probably seen as being quite old now in terms of its the demographic that are using it. But as you said, AI seems to have transcended that and been adopted by all generations. It'd be interesting to know from you if you've got any examples. You mentioned it here of actual collaboration success stories, because we can talk about these things in theory, but from with your own eyes or experiences, what have you seen in terms of actual success stories happening at work which involve multi-generational teams and bringing the best of those different generations?
Before I left the Body Shop, and this is, as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, this was the start of my journey into the world of EDI. But I was one of the co-founders of our first employee network, which was our LGBTQ+ network, and then I became a co-chair and was co-chair of it for the time that I remained at the Body Shop. That to me was a brilliant example of collaboration across different generations. So we had representatives within our committee. So we had a committee of about 14 people that met monthly to talk about, you know, to talk about events that how we could bring our LGBTQ+ community together across the Body Shop. It was very internally focused to begin with, and then we started to go more externally focused and help the organisation with their brand messaging on anything around LGBTQ+ and pride activation. We had different generations within that team, and it was really useful to bring people's different lived experiences, because my experience as a gay woman who came out about 20 years ago compared to a colleague who came out at 5 years ago, you know, at that time, you know, there were different experiences. But even amongst the same generations, as we touched on earlier, we had different lived experiences, but we were able to represent what could be our customer base, what was our wider employee base, our colleague base, to be able to bring some examples of some of the challenges, some of the activity, some of the improvements we wanted to see happen at the Body Shop from an inclusion of our LGBTQ+ community. And it worked. It was very smooth. When we were talking about topics to discuss today, and I thought about that, we never stopped to think about the different generations. It just happened. But we were all there to use our lived experience to influence in a positive way. But we listened, we adapted, and we were empathetic to each other's different needs and different challenges, and as I said, different lived experience. And it was a very successful, as a result, we were a very successful employee network. And by the time I left the Body Shop about 2-3 years ago now, we did have at that point our global employee network of over 600 colleagues. So it was a massive success.
Thank you, Erica. And David, I imagine you've probably got some stories to tell, being in a large organisation.
It's really interesting, actually, because Eric, your example is exactly the same as the one that I was thinking of when I was considering what to discuss around this question, because we recently did some filming last week with the DE&I network leads from our business around some bystander to upstander training and allyship in the workplace. And we're bringing together all generations, all different backgrounds there. And there was an overwhelming feeling from being there myself for that on that day, of a real sort of, it's hard to put it into words, but it really felt like a manifestation of the CGI culture and the way that we operate, and sort of the way we do come together and are accepting of each other and can feel that we can share our stories. And someone did say sort of stepping into CGI is like stepping into a safe place, and those words really resonated with me when I was sort of reflecting on how that day's filming had been, how we were all there together, and sort of just some really strong, powerful stuff was shared. And yeah, I what I also love to see is we've got from new people who've joined the business right through to very experienced people sort of much later in their career, learning from each other, feeling comfortable to communicate with each other, be very open with each other. It sort of really brought to life what it means when we talk about this, and sort of seeing it in practice. And that obviously goes through to, I think, the way that we are day to day, in the way that we work together. For me, it validated and sort of credibly validated what we say in action. And sort of I like I said, I was quite moved and yeah, impressed by it. So.
Yeah, no, I must admit I'm frequently impressed with CGI. They do tend to walk the talk when it comes to all things diversity. One important part of this is around retaining talent and retaining diverse talent. And I get the sense, particularly from you and your talk recently, that obviously, and this is I suppose a fairly well-known piece of knowledge, that the next generation aren't necessarily looking for that job for life, that start here and then work all the way through in the same place and get a gold watch and a carriage clock at the end. I think that's long since passed. So how do we try and retain people, but in the knowledge that actually they may just be passing through, they might have a side hustle? What's your views on that here in terms of trying to retain diverse talent when ultimately they see their career as potentially spanning multiple organizations and doing lots of different things?
I think there's two aspects to that. So one aspect is that Generation Alpha, or the younger generation, they're very education focused. They're very hungry for education, and education doesn't need to necessarily come to go to university. It can be more flexible like that. They want to constantly upskill and learn the latest thing. So that's definitely something to retain talent. That's Generation Alpha, but also I think Generation Z or Z. They want to learn new things. They want to see how they can grow. What's my growth journey here? But also then having that flexibility, as you said, having that side hustle. It's sort of, the gig economy is definitely going to develop further. And there's no stopping to it. So how can companies and organizations support that? There's a nice example, for instance, what Volkswagen did. Volkswagen head offices are in a city in the middle of Germany called Wolfsburg. It's not the most exciting city to live, maybe if you're in your mid-20s. And you're an IT or tech specialist, and you could go to Silicon Valley. So you can weigh up where you want to live, Wolfsburg or Silicon Valley. But they needed to, and they collaborated with the city of Wolfsburg. How can we make it more enticing? We need different skill sets. We're changing as an organization, and we need different specialists to move here. And so they sponsored sort of a startup center where employees can go in the afternoon or a day a week to work on their startup, which is sponsored by Volkswagen. They can get funding for them. So really, rather than discouragement, encouragement, and helping them along the journey. And if they develop a new technology that can be helpful for the future car, and Volkswagen has a stake in it, even better. So think about it positively. So it's the constant upskilling. How can I learn new skills? That's definitely something I feel that younger generations are focused on and will be focused on in the future. And then this, gig economy. How can you encourage flexibility and the side gigs as well?
Do you think that, and I know we're dealing with a lot of broad sweeping generalizations here, but so I have to, kind of acknowledge that in all of these questions. But do you think that they're looking to learn from people, or just looking to learn from technology? Do they think that they could learn everything that they need to know from tech, or is it the experience of others that they're seeking?
I think they are seeking the experience of others and of other generations as well. So I think this openness towards diversity in particular as well, but also this openness to learn comes very natural to the younger generation as well. And I mean, technology, they learn themselves. It comes natural to them. They pick a new technology up and they teach themselves a new app, a new software that they can learn online. But I think it's then these interpersonal skills, the other skills, learning that together in groups. And they also like modular learning with examples. I mean, another example of a brand that's already inviting Generation Alpha is Apple. On their Genius Bar, you can book coding classes for younger kids, absolutely for free. And they give you an iPad and they show you their apps for coding, and that's quite and they love it. I mean, they absolutely love it because they can learn in an interactive environment and they can do things in a hands-on, and that's what I see is what the younger generation definitely needs and wants. So in person, but with technology.
It's quite interesting because, obviously Gen Z and Gen Alpha are so familiar now with e-learning and sort of online modules that is the way that they've probably been, I don't know enough about the education system now, but I do know that is, it's the way that they're looking. But when we have, for example, our new early careers intake join each year, they are so keen as well and so thirsty to get in the office and absorb from the experienced people around us. And I think it's such a myth sometimes where you can read that this generation wants to sit at home and doesn't want to get out there. They are really want to be there. If I go up into our London office, you've always got the early careers people there, and I think that's really interesting one about the perception possibly of these generations. And I think they can see the value of what's to be learned from people who have done this before them. And so a lot of it is just picking up working in a different environment, working in an office corporate environment. There's a lot to learn to navigate there, and all of the, that's equally, I think, as important to them as well, which was a shock to me because I could be brought in by the everyone wants to work from home now. But it was really quite an interesting one to see how keen they were to get in.
And so you touched on your example there of Volkswagen. Do you think there are any other benefits, or are any of you aware of how benefits have changed and environments have had to change to accommodate different generations? Are people looking for different things these days, and are there examples where people have flexed their benefits accordingly?
Yeah. So was that to somebody? Sorry, Roger. Was that to
no, it wasn't to anyone specific.
right,
It's
okay.
really just following on from Pierre. No, that's fine. Feel free to add, because she gave an example of how an organization has a whole almost campus for your side hustle. That's
brilliant.
clearly a benefit.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone had any other examples of how benefits have been shaped, or perhaps the benefits that are important to one generation are much less important to another, and if that's something that's been looked at in your experiences.
Yeah, I think those organisations that are forward thinking are already adapting their benefits to be I guess a cross-sectional offering that will appeal to the different generations. Because of course, if you're at the older, the elder end of the generations, and you're say a baby boomer or Gen X, you could be looking for reduced hours, more flexibility. You may be in that part of your life where you could still have older children, offspring at home, and you could have parents who need care and need support. So or just one of those things, but it's that flexible working opportunity, I think, is something that's going to be increasingly desired and offered as a result. If we want to keep that flexibility and keep that expertise and experience in the workforce, in the workplace, and I think we all know the benefit of having, you know, having different generations all working together, then there's got to be that, I guess, flexibility in what's offered. You know, I think looking at sort of heading towards retirement and how that's handled, that you know, it's another aspect. But then when you're looking at the other end of, you know, younger people or people who are coming in who may have gone to university, I think that's evolving already. But if you do have student loans, then I know some organisations will offer support with student loans. So there's then the parents and supporting with, you know, more paternal leave as well as and more shared leave. Yeah, I think it's having a diverse approach to all the benefits that you know, will encourage people, I guess, to stay and work within that particular workforce.
I think it's also about leaders not making assumptions about people in certain generations. Something we touched on recently, you know, the baby boomers, Generation X, they are seen as the ones with the wisdom and the knowledge and probably the leaders or strategic thinkers in the business through their experience. But it doesn't necessarily, you know, whatever stage, mean that that's the sort of pigeonhole that they, you know, that they want to be shoehorned into. You know, there's lots of other stuff going on. You know, we speak caring responsibilities, or you know, they might want to wind down into retirement, and I think it's that open communication with leaders and sort of being, you know, if you do want to hang on to their talent, but you know, but they want to scale back a bit, can we meet in the middle, and you know, how can we make this work? And I think that's you know, can't say enough for open communication and transparency, and being able to tell your leaders that and where you want to head. And as I said, as important as when you're entering as when you're leaving the workplace, I think, and not losing sight of that.
Do any of you have any examples of organisations where they've actively facilitated knowledge sharing across generation?
I know a few organisations we've worked with that we've supported that coaching and that reverse mentoring. We've supported those processes. I think reverse mentoring can be really helpful from a generational perspective, because if you're encouraging people to sit down and really speak to each other, because yeah, you know, more people are working a hybrid approach or working at home part time, you know, or sometime in the office environment, there could be less opportunity for people from different generations to talk, to learn from each other. There may be a natural draw to, you know, stay and socialize with people that are more, you know, your generation. That depends on the individual. Again, that going back to that, everybody's different. But I think where organizations have had coaching and, you know, reverse mentoring, I think there's been some real successes. If it's introduced in the right way, the communication around it's, you know, positive, I think there's lots of aspects that can help make it successful. But I think there's loads to learn when you put two people from different generations, especially from either ends of the workforce, together to talk about their challenges, their priorities, what they want. You know, that breeds understanding, doesn't it? That breeds that inclusion.
David, is that something that's happened at CGI? Any reverse mentoring?
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, and I mean, we have a young professionals network, and obviously we have mentors from business come in to talk to them as well. But I you know, it's always quite enjoyable. Again, going back to that filming session we had a few weeks ago, it was the more experienced people in the business actually saying, you know, not saying how much they drew from it and speaking to the younger people and understanding their challenges. And it's often the case you can, like, their shared experience, there's challenges that both have experienced at some points in their career, or can map even sort of, you know, challenges they're having at the moment and sort of see them in a different light, you know, and they're quite similar. And, you know, both advise, you know, different points of view on how to sort of navigate them. But yeah, in a nutshell, mentorship is key, I think, and it's, you know, it's prominent in our organisation, has been for some time.
Pia, you in your recent talk, you gave a stat about the percentage of the workforce that are going to be Generation Alpha within the next, help me out. It was you said that in the however many years or within the next 5 years, this percentage of the workforce will be Gen Alpha. Is that?
Yeah, no, what I said was basically that 2 and 3 Gen Alphas will have jobs that don't exist yet as well. And they will be entering the workforce by 2030, basically, the first generation Alphas. Yeah, so it's time to engage with them now and to invite them in so they can understand the different company setups. They understand which direction they want to go. It's apparently also a very educated generation. 90% are going to finish high school and 50% are going to have a university degree, which is 10% higher than their generation, their predecessors. So they're going to spend more time educating, learning, apparently also living at home longer than generations before. That's another study that I just reviewed recently.
And so for organizations, what are practical things that they can do to prepare for the next generation so they're not surprised by how old-fashioned work is?
Yeah, I mean, it's inviting them in, and there's some examples of companies already doing that. I think there's a great example of Lego with their Build the Change program that they're doing at the moment. For instance, they're doing a collaboration with the Natural History Museum in London, where they invite Generation Alphas in to support and help them find solutions for their sustainability program, create the sustainability solutions for the future with our Lego bricks. Lego has an easy story to engage Gen Alpha, of course, but it's an interesting collaboration also with the Natural History Museum where you find the next generation. They also have a collaboration of building the future school, basically, or learning environment by Gen Alpha with Pharrell Williams. Pharrell Williams has done a collaboration with them, a film about his life. It's that what makes you different, that makes you special. So, not everyone learns the same. People learn differently. So how should the school of the future look like? Create that with Lego. So they do some really interesting initiatives to engage the next generation. Another example is also Mercedes-Benz in Germany. In their factories in the summer, they create summer camps for a day or 2 days. You can go in, you can see how cars are built, you can understand how that industry is changing, and then you can build your own car in the afternoon. So it's a creative session that's quite interactive, where they already learn about what the brand stands for, but also how that working environment looks like and how it's changing. So, I mean, it's all about, I think, brand storytelling, inviting them in. At the conference, Roger, we were at last week, I think there was a lot of talk about podcasts, using that as employee engagement. Or also, I like the podcast of the two CEOs, communicating their story and their ambitions to the wider workforce. So this is like humanizing stories, which I think are so important. And again, if you want to communicate with the next generation, that's what they're going to watch.
So I think the examples that you gave were fantastic. And I think you've got companies like Lego and Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz. They're obviously big organizations people have heard of. They've got that equity in the brand and are probably in a better position to set up a campus for side hustles. So as far as, I guess, smaller organizations go, or small to medium enterprises, what things could they do that aren't going to be quite such big initiatives? What just simple tips that you could give people around?
Yeah, so I think it's the humanized brand stories. What does your organization stand for? I mean, values are still very important for Gen Z, but also Gen Alpha. That's going to continue to be important. More than 30% of Gen Alpha say they want to make a difference growing up, to help people and planet. So how can you help them make a difference? That's a continued sort of topic that you say. So telling that story, humanized story through your employees. I mean, they're hanging out on YouTube. So I think Unilever is doing another big company, I know, but it doesn't need to be costly, telling stories via their employees. I work in marketing. This is how my day-to-day job looks like. And it doesn't need to be a polished video. It can be sort of a humanized story to engage them and to show the experience of what it is to work at that company. That can be a simple podcast, that can be a simple YouTube video. It can be encourage the younger generation in your workforce to be sort of a mini influencer and share their story in a humanized way. Yeah, I think that this is how you connect. Invite them in, positive stories, and can you collaborate with the, your local university on sort of internship programs? That's another thing, how you can invite this next generation in.
And Erica and David, if you've got any top tips.
Well, I think the key things we've sort of touched on, but I think they're quite important. So I'm happy to say them again. I think it's great what Pia's just shared. There's some wonderful ideas there, and hopefully the smaller and medium-sized companies are adopting similar or can adopt sort of similar processes or practices. But it's then once you've got that younger workforce in, or you've got that diverse workforce, I think it's really investing and supporting your leaders within your organization to then make the most and engage with those different generations, not stereotyping, avoiding any stereotyping and bias, getting to know individuals, being empathetic leaders, making sure your leaders have those abilities to really understand the differences and to engage and embrace that talent that lies within the different generations. So, getting them into one thing, it's then making sure you're doing things as well to support your talent once it's there, once you've got it working for you.
And I think they're actually, the new generation coming through are very purpose-driven as well. And Pia, the examples that you were just citing sort of reminded me of we've got an initiative, student Kickstart initiative, when the early careers joiners come into the business, and it's where they're split into certain groups and set a real business challenge, and they go off and come up with a solution with it, and work quite independently and autonomously to come up with a solution with mentors, and then sort of a dragon style presentation at the end of it, where they deliver back to leaders of the business of what they've come up with. And it's quite nerve-wracking probably, but it really does feel purposeful. And these solutions that they come up with have gone on to sort of be adopted by the business. So to give them that kind of responsibility, or perceived to have that responsibility when they pretty much joined the business, I think it really helps them. And the people that have been part of those groups, I see, have gone on to sort of be lead in the business, sort of really good career trajectory in quite a short space of time as well. So I definitely think responding to that, and it's a great program that was brought in relatively young, it's about 6 years old now, but it's respect as well. I think respecting them and and that talent that they're bringing to the business.
Thank you. I'm going to go slightly off piece now, because we put a poll out earlier, which was, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to managing a multi-generational workforce? And there was the possible answers were differences in communication styles, varying expectations around flexibility and work arrangements, conflicting views on career progression, and managing knowledge transfer between generations. So if I end the poll and share the results, it would appear that varying expectations around flexibility and working arrangements were the ones that gave the biggest challenge. So I wonder if, as we're approaching the end, it might be interesting just to have a few words on that, and how people can help to overcome that or address those challenges around people's expectations around what flexibility means to them.
I'd go back to communication and being clear and upfront, and setting out ensuring you're on the same page from the start. And that I think that's key to seeing whether you are the right fit for an organization. Anyway, when you are doing your due diligence, I think obviously there's different requirements for different roles. It's not one size fits all. You know, the flexibility is something that should be discussed, and you know, the leaders and those working for them to feel confident to have that discussion with each other, I think is the key. And then you hopefully will find that balance along the way.
Encouraging the dialogue from the start, basically in the interview process. It should be part. I mean, nowadays it's a key criteria, right? I mean, we've seen this year is definitely the headlines were all about everyone back to the office and enforcing that, but it's more in terms of you know, what's your policy around it, but also how having that dialogue with the people in your team. And yeah, as David said earlier as well, particularly younger generations, they want to be in the office. That's my experience as well. They are like, I'm going to be there every day, and I want to learn. And you know, probably they're living in a smaller flat or a flat share at the beginning as well. So they're happy to get out of there. And you know, when you have kids, you have a family, you prefer a bit more of a flexible setup. So I think it depends on the life stage. And it's an open conversation that should be had nowadays, because we've all seen we can be more flexible. We can work from home. The technology is there. It's doable. But you know, find a way that works for the company and for you. So it's that open dialogue, I would say.
I'd love to see, I agree with everything David and Piers just shared, and just building on it, I'd love to see organizations get to a point where there can be flexibility across organizations. I think this happens anyway. I think organizations do have probably certain teams who are more remote than other areas, and of course there's some roles that dictate that, where you know, you have to be present in a work environment. But I think it's being quite open, again, back to the dialogue bit, back to the communication, about being open and providing the right opportunities to engage with everybody to understand what that particular team's needs are, because it's not even within an organization, it's not one size fits all across an organization. So really listening to what your team needs and what will work for you as a team, because that could change over time. Doesn't matter what the job content is. It could be the different makeup of the people working there. But if that can continue to evolve, and leaders are maybe empowered with the decision making on that based on the engagement and the feedback within their team, that would be a really super flexible way to approach it in an organization. And then you're really getting that, you're respecting people's different views, and as a result, successfully engaging with everybody. Whether that's, yeah, I'm sure it is happening in some places, but I think the more that's done, the more that more people will have their needs met within a working environment.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I've been making a few notes as we've been going, and I've got some points which I think can summarize some of the things and the people who've joined today could potentially take away. And those are that it seems that you have to personalize the approaches to every generation. There's 5 generations. They might have some different unique needs, but definitely one size doesn't fit all. And equally, not every generation conforms to the stereotypes, as you were saying, David, with experienced people sometimes wanting to not work as much, and then young people obviously really hungry to take on those big challenges. So encouraging that dialogue. I've got some notes that say about cultivating an inclusive culture through storytelling. So we hear a lot about storytelling, but certainly using those internal networks, if you have them, to share the experiences across generations. You've obviously got mechanisms these days for storytelling, TikTok being extremely successful for day in the life narratives, and podcasts to connect with different audiences. And then finally, hear this very much for you about engaging with Generation Alpha early. So start connecting with them now, start thinking these are the people that are coming into our workforce in 2030. So start thinking about how you're going to engage with them using technology. And you gave some examples about meaningful and exciting and fun initiatives that can help that generation to connect with your organization. So look, thanks once again to everyone for joining today, and thank you particularly for Erica, David and Pierre for your brilliant contributions and insights. I've already shared the results, and as we can see, it was really about the flexibility of working arrangements. It's the one that came out on top there as the biggest challenge. But just before I do go, I just wanted to mention, it's obviously a slightly shameless plug, but I'm going to do it anyway, that there are plenty of ways to engage with our employer brand community, and those include the Leap Listens podcast. I think you've all been on it, haven't you? If not, why not? But no, you've all been guests, and I think we're up to certainly over 70 episodes now, which is great. We've got our No BS employer brand newsletter, which is next one is out in Feb, and of course we've got the in-person meetups. We'll be sharing an email after this. We'll have some feedback, so we're always looking to improve how we do things here at Leap, so please do feel to feedback, and there's so we'll be sure to follow up with you. So all that remains to say is thank you once again, Pierre, David and Erica, and thank you to everyone for joining.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.